Hello Nursery, it's time for our literacy lesson. As you know, we've been looking a lot at houses and homes. This is a traditional tale about a house made of sweets. Let's see what happens in the story. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time there lived two children called Hansel and Gretel. They lived with their father and their stepmother in the woods. Their father was a woodcutter. The woodcutter was very poor and he could no longer provide food for his family. One night his wife suggested that they take the children into the forest and leave them there. Hansel and Gretel overheard their evil stepmother's plan and they were feeling very sad. Hansel crept out and he found some pebbles. They shone brightly in the moonlight, and he filled his pockets with the pebbles and crept back inside. The next morning they all went for a walk in the forest, and as they walked, Hansel dropped the pebbles along the path. They went further and further into the forest, and Hansel and Gretel grew tired. So the woodcutter made a fire and told them to get some rest here. When they awoke, they realized that they were alone, but Hansel's plan had worked. They could follow the stones all the way home. When they arrived home, the woodcutter was overjoyed. However, their stepmother was very cross. Later that night, she told the woodcutter he must get rid of the children again. The next day, the stepmother gave Hansel and Gretel 2 slices of bread for their breakfast, and they set out into the forest again. This time, they walked a lot further, and they got to the heart of the forest. As they walked along, Hansel dropped breadcrumbs along the path. When the children were tired, the woodcutter told them to gather the wood so he could build them a fire. He told them to rest by the fire, and once again they fell asleep. When they woke up, they found themselves alone again. Hansel was not worried, as he told Gretel he'd put all the breadcrumbs out. When they looked along the path, though, they'd found that they'd been eaten by the birds and forest animals. Hansel and Gretel walked and walked through the forest. Eventually they came across an amazing house. It was made of gingerbread and decorated with sweets, icing and lollipops. Hansel and Gretel began to eat the sweets. Then all of a sudden an old woman came out of the gingerbread house. She invited them both inside. But the children were inside. She found that the old woman was very cruel. The old woman locked Hansel into a cage. She wanted to fatten him up to eat him. One day the woman showed Gretel the oven where she was going to cook Hansel. Gretel decided to trick the old woman. She told her that it was not big enough to fit in the oven, and the old woman leaned forward to take a closer look to check the size of the oven. As she did, Gretel pushed her straight into the oven. Next, Gretel found the key to the cage and unlocked Hansel, so he could get out. They were overjoyed. Before leaving, Hansel and Gretel had a look around the gingerbread house. They found a chest full of gold coins. They decided to bring the chest home with them. Along the path on the way through the forest, Hansel and Gretel found a path they recognized. They ran excitedly along the path and finally saw their home in the distance. There outside the cottage was their father. Their stepmother had died, and now they had enough riches to last them a lifetime, and they would never be hungry again. The 3 of them lived happily ever after. The end. Can you design your own house? Maybe you could use a box to create it. Would it be full of sweets? Would it be brightly coloured? Would it be a big house, a small house? It's up to you. Have a look at the pictures on the planning for some ideas. Bye, Nursery.